Welcome to Bari Banter, where we talk everything bariatric surgery with the people that know it best, the patients. I'm Shannon, and I'm here with my co-hostess with the mostest,
Lita. So sit back, relax, and remember, sip, sip, sip.
Well, welcome to episode 79 of Bari Banter. We're doing it a little bit differently today. No guest on this episode. However,
I'm a guest. What are you talking about?
Oh, you can be a guest today. What we want to do is every month or so sit down with just Lita and I and kind of chat about a certain topic, focus on a certain topic. Today's topic is like the year leading into surgery.
Pre-op.
Just trying to cover all the things that, we had questions about. I've reached out to a surgeon who's given me answers to a heap of questions that we had, which we feel will cover everything for anyone who is leading into surgery, what to expect and all that kind of stuff. Before we get stuck into it though, we have set up a Patreon.
I was going to say an OnlyFans. That's wrong.
That's next week. We wanted to put it out there because we've had a few people approach us about advertising and doing sponsorships, and it's not really, as we kind of, Alita and I bounce back and forth with, we didn't really want to do that because we want people to come on and feel like they can just talk about anything, like, not limited by, if they don't like a certain company or something didn't agree with them or something went wrong. Like, we don't want to have that limitation. So we thought, we have had people kind of say they'd love to support Bari Banter and what we do and blah, blah, blah. And we said, well, we'll set up a Patreon. We don't want it to be just a one-way thing. We want Patreon to be kind of like, we obviously give things to the Patreons, and it's kind of a support network outside the support network that kind of helps us push in a certain direction with topics and different things. So we want to make it very interactive where, the people on the Patreon can tell us what to talk about in these kind of one-on-ones. We're
going to start up a closed Facebook group for our Patreon members, where we can discuss and do little forums and that sort of thing. Get any questions that people want answered. We're also going to do regular one-on-ones with people, or I guess like a Zoom meeting, once every couple of months, every month or so, like sit down with Shannon and I and everybody in our Patreon group, and just have a good chat with them, answer any questions, and just make it part of the family, I guess.
Because we'd love to sit down with even with an expert and kind of have a group session with an expert, like
a dietitian or psychologist.
It's something we just didn't want to put ads and stuff on Bari Banter. Like, it does cost us to run this, and we've been doing this for a year and a half or so now. And we kind of just went, it'd be good to have that little bit of financial support as well, because it is very time consuming and financially sometimes. It was just something we put out there. You'll find the link underneath pretty much everything. We're going to put it below. Don't feel like you need to support it. It's not pressure in any way whatsoever. It's just something like, if you feel like you want to and you want to be part of the Bari Banter family a little bit deeper, it gives you opportunity. Plus, we'll give away little merch things and different things that we've got organised that we're going to be doing as well. But that's enough about that, because that's a topic we find really awkward to talk about ourselves. Like, we're the worst person to kind of...
Give us money.
No, but it's we can't do the whole... And we've never been good at self-promotion with that kind of stuff. We kind of just go, no, we'll just pay for it. We'll just do it. We'll just
do it ourselves.
Yeah, but so... Anyway, on with our actual subject today. So, leading into your, surgery, that first year, Leeds, how was your whole first year?
Gosh... I should have been more prepared for this. No, I guess I knew a few people who had it, who I knew quite personally as well, which that was really good to sort of see them go through the process, which was very helpful. But I because I have knee problems and all that sort of thing, my weight was not only becoming a mental problem for me, it was becoming a physical problem as well. I'm very immobile now with my knee. Imagine what I would have been like with, an extra 60 kilos on me. So I actually approached it with my dietitian rather than my surgeon. So I worked closely with the dietitian for 6 months, where I was seeing her every sort of 3 to 4 weeks for 6 months, just sort of giving it one final shot. I signed up for private health insurance and...
Did you have much support outside of the professional side of things? Did you, you said, you kind of knew people that have had the surgery and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was a stalker. I never really approached them. There was one person in particular who lives on the coast as well, and I was sending her messages, and my first doctor turned me down for a referral to see a surgeon, and it was her that said, no, it's your right to at least just go and have a conversation with the surgeon. Just because you're making that a first appointment with the surgeon doesn't mean that you're going to be on the chopping block next week having surgery sort of thing. She goes, but everybody should have a right to be able to at least have that conversation. So it was her that kind of made me go and see a different doctor to get the referral to see my surgeon.
Did you do private health cover or did you?
Well, in my first appointment, I'd gone and seen the surgeon and I was like, I'm getting it done. I know what date I want to have it done, blah, blah, blah. I said, I'm accessing my super, and he turned around and straight up said, no, I'm too young. He doesn't want me to use my super.
Yeah.
So I joined private health insurance and I worked the whole
because I think that big good thing to first cover off is like costs and stuff, because I think that plays a big part for a lot of people on, taking this step.
And I think as well, before we go over the costs, for me personally, waiting that 12 months was the best thing for me. I learnt so much mentally as well as what I was being prepared for, that I think it really helped. Yeah,
it almost puts a little bit more emphasis on it because you're giving away, I guess, to a year of not doing diets and weight stuff to kind of, for this process.
Yeah.
Because I remember my line was, after surgery, you kind of gave away that year to a degree. But cost is a thing. And there's a lot of people out there that I think it's a big burden. Because you did private health cover, didn't you? So for the year.
I did, yep.
Do you remember what the cost behind that kind of was?
For my private health?
Yeah.
I think I was paying about $124 a month for 12 months.
And who were you with? Who did you go through?
I went through Medibank private.
Yeah.
You went through NIB, didn't
NIB,
you?
yeah. They don't do it anymore though.
Well, they do.
They do.
But that was the one person that we kind of told people to steer clear of, not because they're a bad health fund, but purely because you have to pay everything up front and then they reimburse you no matter what the procedure is. So like you still are going to be out of pocket the full amount. And then after the procedure, they reimburse you, whereas most other health funds you're still out of pocket, but you don't have to pay the full amount.
I think that's changed since I was with them because I don't think it was like that. Like I remember getting a few bills that I was like, oh, what's that about? Like after surgery, like there was like anaesthetist, I think it was, bill and stuff that came through and they ended up sorting that out. But there was a few bills like that I was blood tests and different things that I had to pay on the way through that I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
Because it was costly to have private health cover. It's not something we usually have in normal life because it is expensive. And I think it was like, for me, I think it was $130 a month or something like that. It was, quite a
It is quite costly. And I kept mine for 6 months after surgery just because I kind of wanted to make sure that I made it through like the leak stage and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Bloody should have kept it for longer because, gallbladder.
Yeah, well, that's if I'd have known the gallbladder thing where like so many people have to have their gallbladder out, I probably would have kept mine for a little bit longer. I think I kept mine for about 12 months after my surgery as
I
well.
would almost, like this is, again, not come from any like professionals' mouths, but I would almost say before you having surgery to just get a scan on your gallbladder because from what I've heard from my surgeon, he said that a lot of the time, and my doctor actually, a lot of the time overweight people actually have the gallstones, but they're not active, so to speak, because there's so many other things going on in our bodies that it's not triggered. But then it's the rapid weight loss that then triggers it.
Yeah.
So like if it's something that you're concerned about or if you experience like reflux sort of symptoms, because that's what it felt like for me, I would almost say, can I have my gallbladder checked out? Because
you had to pay for your gallbladder, didn't you? Because you didn't even go through public for that. How much did that cost you for your gallbladder?
Look, it cost me probably about $8,000 to get my gallbladder removed. It could have been a lot more expensive, but it ended up costing me about $8,000.
Yeah, wow. God, that's a lot of money, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I could have gone through the public system for that, but then sometimes like I could have been waiting years to have it done. Like I was chatting to other people within the community who had gallstone symptoms a lot worse than what I did, and they were in like a public hospital for up to 2 weeks on morphine and stuff, just trying to flush them all through because they just couldn't operate. So like for me, I was just kind of like, you know what, it sucks, it's expensive, but I just have to do it.
Because obviously at the end as well with private health cover, surgeons have different gaps, don't they? So like I think my gap was like 5.5. I think I ended up paying at the time $5,500. I think my gap was. So along with paying obviously for a year of private health, 2 years by the end of it, you have to pay the gap.
So there are some surgeons, and it's very rare, but there are some surgeons out there who participate in the known gap, which is you only pay like $500 and your health fund will cover the rest.
Yeah.
So if funds is extremely like tight for you, then I'd be doing a call around in your local area asking for if anybody participates in the no
And what's
gap.
that? What makes you qualify for a known gap? Like, is it just
gap?
a surgeon?
It's just the surgeon.
But with that, because I know with other ones, there's been ones where there's been like no gaps and stuff like that. But you kind of sacrifice the before and after care. Like that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Like obviously,
I was going to say, I know there's one person in Queensland that does it,
Yeah.
and I think quite a few people have gone through him, and they don't particularly have like an actual team that gives you aftercare and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
So
if you're doing that, you have to just obviously be prepared to have the support outside, and obviously be maybe aware that you may need to pay for your own nutrition or dietitian and psychologist and stuff like that. Because for me, that was all included.
Yeah.
That was all part of the process. Like they understand that like it wasn't just cutting you up; it was also like, you know, getting your head in the right spot, which is kind of like, you know, an extra thing. So yeah, I think that's something to be aware of, because cost, it's like the poor man always pays twice. It's like my quote for life. Sometimes it's like you have to spend the money to get the best quality result.
Yeah.
Not saying those people that don't do like gaps and stuff like that, you know, aren't great. They're probably amazing. It's just how ready you have to be. You have to be maybe a little bit more prepared going that way.
Yeah. So, and the costing, to break it down as well. So, because it's quite fresh in my mind because I used to do it at work.
Yeah.
So like if you're uninsured and you're not accessing your super, or if you're uninsured and are accessing your super, your out-of-pocket expense, give or take, will be roughly around sort of 20 to 24,000, depending on your surgeon fees.
And that's taking out of your super.
That's taking out of your super, or just paying, like getting a personal loan, or just paying because you had $25,000 sitting in your bank account. So that's no assistance at all with health insurance. It's roughly, depending obviously on your state and the hospital and all that sort of thing, but it's roughly between $20,000 to $24,000.
Wow.
And that's what it was with our practice, and that was all of your aftercare as well, pretty much for 18 months as well. That included the hospital stay for 3 nights, the anaesthetist, the assistant, and the fee for the surgeon, plus your aftercare. But then there's other things as well that they don't tell you. So like if you have the bypass in hospital the next day, you do a barium swallow, and if you're uninsured, you have to pay for that barium swallow. So that's could cost a couple $100.
Yeah.
If you had the sleeve done, they have to biopsy your stomach. Again, if you're uninsured, that will cost you a couple $100 to biopsy your stomach. So there's all these like little fees that occasionally you'll get in the mail, and you'll be like, ugh, where did that come from?
Well, that was the part, because like when I was tossing up, obviously I went through private health cover as well, but I remember I had the money at the time to pay for it up front, and I was like, oh, do I just pay for it up front because I don't really want to use my super and blah, blah, or, you know, wait a year. I wanted to kind of just get it happening. But my whole concern was like, what happens if something else arises? You know, with private health cover, that's all covered. You know, like if there was complications.
If you end up in ICU or something,
Yeah, because that's something else we asked the surgeon, which we'll cover on in a second, is the complications that you may face after surgery. And that was a concern for me. So that's why I went the private health cover route, because that's all, the hospital stay side of things is all covered if you did have to go back under for any of those little complications. Luckily I didn't have that, but it kind of gave me that peace of mind.
And it's a lot nicer as well having your private health insurance. Yes, it is. You have to pay the, say, $130 a month for the year or whatever. But then you only, when it comes to hospital time, you only pay whatever your excess is at the hospital. So like the hospital that I went through for the 3-night stay, it's around $13,500. So that's a massive chunk that if you have private health insurance, you only have to pay, say, your $500 gap or excess, whatever it's called, when you rock up at the hospital. So they're covering essentially $13,000 for you for your hospital stay. And then you just have to pay your surgeon's fee, which is usually between $5,000 and $7,000, depending on what aftercare package they have and all that sort of thing, and depending on the surgeon and all that sort of thing. So you've got your $5,500 to $7,000 for your surgeon, surgical assistant, and the anaesthetist. But if you have private health insurance, you will get a portion of that back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was like, even like when I asked about symptoms, obviously the big one that we all kind of don't want to have is the leak, which can be 3 to 10 days. Oh, it's within 3 to 10 days post-op, but I read that as like that's how long you have to stay in hospital for. But like no, it's 3 to,
that's how long that generally within the first sort of 2 weeks is when you're in the danger zone of a leak.
Because you remember like in the early stages, like I think this is something we'll have to touch back on when we do the episode about like talking about post post-surgery and all those stages, because that was kind of where it played on my mind a lot, was like overthinking every little feeling you had after surgery, like, oh, that's a leak.
Yep.
So it's interesting to hear a surgeon say, you know, leak symptoms, you feel crook. I'm like, okay. Because I remember having like little like pains under my ribs and stuff like that. And I thought, oh my God, is that like, which a lot of people have had since, and it must just be part of like, you know, the healing process.
So what I've heard from past patients, like we've had a few people on BARI Banter as well who have experienced a leak, but from what I've heard, it literally feels like you're having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Like, so feeling crook, it's not like, you know, oh, I just overate and I feel like nauseous and stuff. Like that could be it. But from what I've heard, it's like what we used to tell patients was, if you're like on the floor having a heart attack, let us know.
Yeah, and obviously, guys, this section, if you're kind of already anxious about having surgery, maybe cover your ears, because it's a very like, even when he started going through, like we'll go through some other things, like the usual quote leak percentage is less than 1%. So like the people that have a leak is less than 1%, which is like out of all the people that have it. So statistically speaking, it's very unlikely, but we like people to just know.
It's a possibility. You know, you're going into hospital to have an operation. It's a possibility.
It's the same as, you know, a bleed. So, you know, a bleed is 1 to 2%, which is, so you have a higher likelihood of a bleed than you do a leak. But the bleed is, as he says, is usually on the table. Yeah. Like, and it's not usually an after. Like, it's like if it happens when you're on the table, then obviously they fix you up.
They fix you up before they.
So they're saying like 1 to 2% may have a bleed, but it's not like you're going to die. You know, it's like they'll just fix you up and, you know, send you on your merry way.
He said here for the bypass, around 5% of bypass patients will have a GJ ulcer. Now, GJ ulcer, from what I'm not going to try and pronounce it because it's a very like medical term, but essentially that's like an ulcer on like where they kind of do the cutting and the incision and the stitching and all that sort of thing.
So it's almost like a blood blister.
An ulcer on the incisional part. So that's a 5% chance when you have a bypass.
Yeah.
You can't get them, well, I don't think you can get them with a sleeve because it's just nip and tuck sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, he especially mentions bypass around 5% for the GJ ulcer. You got reflux was a big one, which is obviously I hear a lot of that. So 10 to 15% of sleeve may have reflux after. 2 to 5% is OAGB. Do we know what that is?
A mini bypass.
Oh, so with the mini bypass, so 2 to 5% can still have reflux after the mini bypass.
And that's why, though, it's a lot higher to get reflux after a sleeve than what it is a bypass, which is why a lot of people will get you to do a barium swallow prior to having surgery, because if you already suffer from severe reflux prior to surgery, obviously you've got a chance of it becoming worse after surgery. So most surgeons will go down the lines of a bypass over the sleeve in that case, just because nobody wants to live with severe reflux forever.
Because he also says here, and is this part of the symptoms for the leak where it's LUQ pain?
No, so that's
I was like, I had that. That was just gas pain. Why I always put it down to.
So that was, he was pretty much saying upper gas pain is what that is.
Which I think something I definitely under-predicted. Like everyone was like, oh, gas pain. I'm like, yeah, it'll be right. But I remember laying in like the recovery room and like being like, oh, I just can't comfortable. You know, it was like this really uncomfortable feeling in my back.
I didn't really have the gas pain until I was at home. Yeah, the first couple of days in hospital, I was more nauseous and like feeling crook than anything else. Like it was just, I guess for me, the anesthetics wearing off was the biggest part for me. And it wasn't really until I got home that I started feeling that uncomfortable sort of like ache in my shoulders, but it wasn't unbearable for me.
Yeah.
That was the worst time for Shen to stop talking. I finished my sentence at exactly the time that Shen tried to take a sip of his coffee.
Yeah. And like I was also just reading through, obviously he went through all like the things that could go wrong. There's fever. Can't say that word, tachycardia.
So tachycardia is essentially where your heart rate is higher than 100 beats per minute. Okay. So quite a high, or is that high or is that low? I don't know. Well, but
that's quite low because as for a sitting heart rate, that's quite high.
Yeah.
Like when I run, it's like 140, 150.
Yeah. Okay. So that word tachycardia
is a high
is
resting
to do
heart
with
rate.
your heart rate.
You got nausea, vomiting, anorexia. Is that anorexia? Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a long-term symptom of obviously having the sleeve. You do see
Some
people go the opposite
way.
way and develop like an eating habit of like, not an eating habit, but like a eating disorder that goes the opposite way, from being obese to becoming anorexia.
Which I think
Anorexic.
that has a lot to do with the aftercare as well, like working with psychologists and dietitians and
because you got bleed usually on the table or first 20 to 48 hours, pain, syncope, tachycardia. You should be pronouncing these. You're way better with words than I am. Pallor depends on
the magnitude of the bleed. So essentially, he's just saying they're the different symptoms that you can have depending on how severe the bleed is.
Yeah. So really, it all comes down to, yes, you can have a leak, very low percentage, under 1%. But I guess it's one of those things you have to kind of, I always said, choose your heart. Like, I was willing to risk having a leak or a bleed or, those complications in the order to maybe just, at the end of the day, my life, like my health and stuff was already bad. So, having a leak was like, I'm pretty immobile as it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we put a lot of emphasis on it. Shouldn't be just like I'm just going to have the sleeve or I'm just going to have a bypass. It needs to be something you are willing to take that risk for in order for you to be like, okay, I understand the importance of this myself and also understand like the risks involved with this and I'm willing to like live with them if, God forbid, something does happen. Because, it's like anything, you can get hit by lightning.
You could go driving your car tomorrow and, you know. So, Shan, when you were looking into surgery, did you know much about the different procedures or did you – so when you went and had your appointment with your surgeon, did you sort of go in there with the idea of having a specific procedure or what was your understanding of all the different –
Well, I think even now, like I think over even the last year I started like understanding the other operations. I kind of always just went, there's bypass the sleeve, there's band – and I kind of understood like but even before I went in and sat down with my surgeon, I didn't understand even that. Like, so I went in there and went, tell me what the things are, pros and cons, blah, blah, blah. And I think for me, I went with the sleeve because at the time they talked about with, it might have even been the cyst or something that you had to stay vigilant of your whole life that could develop over time, which I don't know.
Maybe an ulcer.
Yeah, it could have been something, but I remember being like, I don't want to have to monitor for something or get checkups regularly for something.
It might have been the malnutrition because
no, it was like something could develop I'll have to find out and touch back in on another thing. But remember there was something that was like, I don't want to have to deal with that long term. I don't want to have that concern in the back of my head because I'm an overthinker as it is. I don't want to have to be like, I got a cramp or is it that, for me, I'm such an overthinker that that would have just done my head in.
So you were offered the sleeve or the bypass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the R&Y at the time, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And we went away and I went, no, I don't want to have to deal with the long-term situation of that. So, I'm going to go the sleeve. I'm glad I did. Looking back, if I had my time again, and I've said on this podcast before, I probably would have went the mini bypass just because with like the working out and, the malnutrition and stuff like that, those extra little things that I'm like, that would have been handy.
Yeah.
Because as we're going to touch on in a second, we'll go through all the different operations and kind of the pros and cons to them. And that was, even looking at the sleeve, the regain rate's higher, blah, blah, compared to bypass. Yes, you have more chance of like a few little niggles and different little complications with the bypass, but it's not really like...
There's no like... It's pretty on par with the sleeve, really.
Because obviously we wrote down like all the procedures we could think of and put them to him and said, sorry, tell us the pros and cons, like blah, blah. So we kind of said, banned. And his response was, don't do them. Inferior operation, in my view, 99% revision rate, which I think is very honest.
I don't think he didn't mean like don't get it done. I think he meant he doesn't do them.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So he's saying, but there's 99% revision rate.
Yeah, and I can say in the last 2 years working in the surgery, most of our band patients have been coming back in to get revision.
Because it's not a super permanent thing. Because I remember hearing about the band earlier on, and there's nothing against, there's people out there that have done really well with the band.
I'd love to get, if anyone's listening and knows people who have had the band, I'd love to have a chat to them about it.
Yeah, it's definitely it's definitely tougher because you have you could change, like you can take fluid out of it.
You're in control of it.
Which is kind of, for us, was kind of a big red flag, going into this. We didn't want to be in control of it. We've been in control of our weight for 30 years and that hasn't gone great.
When I went in and saw my surgeon, I got offered either the band or the sleeve. And in my head, I knew straight away that, because I didn't really know much about the bypass. So I kind of knew that he was going to offer me the band or the sleeve.
Yeah.
And straight up, I said no to the band for two reasons. One, because I know that if I have control over it, I would have ended up just taking all the fluid out and I would have been stuck in the same places where I was, at the very beginning. I have no self-control. So like, I'm going to go on a holiday. Let me just take all the fluid out and then eat my way through the holiday. And then, I'll come back and I'll put the fluid back in and then it'll be uncomfortable because I've got fluid in again. Yeah. So I'll go get it taken back out again because it's uncomfortable and I don't like that.
Yeah.
And also the other reason why I didn't get it is because the idea of having a foreign body inside my body turned me off a little bit. You've had many a
foreign body.
You're disgusting. No, but like I just didn't like whenever I have like piercings or anything like that, my body rejects it. So I didn't really.
Well, it's almost like it's not meant to be there.
100%. Yeah. So like my nose came out, my nose rings come out, my belly button, like everything kind of just. If I have a foreign body in me, I want to repel it. So I was stop laughing at me. so I think in my mind I was just kind of like, I don't particularly want to have a band just in case my body reacts to it. Plus I also heard a lot of horror stories of people vomiting all the time and I hate vomiting. Like anytime I vomit I cry. So like I didn't want to live my life that way.
Well, that's the same I guess with the balloon. Like balloon, again, I haven't heard many people having that, but I remember hearing about it.
It's relatively new, I think that's why.
The surgeon we talked to literally said shit. Used to do them, don't do them anymore. The drugs
Saxenda, Contrave and Ozempic
are as good as in my opinion. So like that's quite honest, and I feel like that's kind of someone who has done them and now goes, they're probably go on par with these kind of weight loss drugs.
Which the weight loss drugs are expensive and like very expensive. They're like $200-$300 a month.
Yeah,
and you've got to be injecting yourself every single
day.
For
anyone who doesn't know what the balloon is, it's literally they put put a bag in your stomach almost, and then they kind of expand it. So it's giving you the restriction, I guess, of a sleeve, but it's just like a big air bubble, I guess.
It's a good gateway into it though, because we were talking. It's a gateway procedure.
Bariatric.
They say you can lose up to 20 to 30 kilos on it. You can only have it in place for 6 months or 12 months, depending on which balloon they use.
I think they called it wasn't it the bridesmaid? No, not bridesmaid, or like.
Yeah, the brides to be or the honeymoon. Yeah. So you lose 20 to 30 kilos. It's in there for 6 to 12 months, depending on which balloon they use. But it's not done as a like big operation, so to speak. It's done as an endoscopy. So they're literally as if you were getting your stomach looked at like an endoscopy. That's how they do it. So you go under. It's like going in for just like day surgery. You go under, they pop a tube down your throat, they put the balloon in, they fill it up with 600 mils worth of liquid, saline, and then it's in there for 6 months or so.
Yeah. So the next one is sleeve. That's obviously the one we went with. What he said for it was most popular, good op, metabolic and restrictive, maybe 12% weight redivision. I love that I literally said to him in the thing, like,
don't
just
big
dumb
words.
it down. Please just dumb it down. And he's like, still put these massive words in there. So that's pretty much 12% weight regain. Reflux can be an issue. I've converted a few sleeves to bypass for awful reflux. So, and that is something that the guests will have on for the next episode, because after we do these episodes, we want to bring a guest on who's in that period of time, and we're going to bring on my ex-wife who is going through the early stages because she's going through this.
Get your questions in now, guys.
Right? And that was something I said to her, and that's why I pushed her towards the mini bypass, which I don't want to touch on hers too much, but like I know she does have reflux. So I was like, having the sleeve probably wouldn't be in her best interest, because I think I was already concerned about that. Like someone who has reflux issues prior, it's only going to emphasize on
and
that.
her reflux is getting quite bad at the moment too. So yeah. Anyway,
we'll talk more about that when she comes on. But and then we've obviously got the OAGB, which is the mini bypass. Yep. So this is kind of where I pushed her, because obviously this is what I would have had. And as the surgeon said, good op, metabolic and restrictive, bile reflux uncommon but awful.
Ulcer.
Yeah, can be shitty. You keep reading that one because there's some big words coming in that one.
We might have to Google what that means.
Yeah, I know. You can't even say it. Sterohoria, not uncommon. Alita will Google that one as we come to it. But this one was a good one because it's kind of like, I know they have the RMY, which we'll touch on in a sec, and the SADIs and stuff like that. Mini bypass, because obviously you get the restrictive stomach, and you also get malnutrition, which is a good long-term weight monitor, like to kind of make sure you don't take all the sugars and different things out of your food, which is something you should definitely look into. Because for me, even being able to scull, like where with the mini bypass and the bypass and stuff like that, you can still scull or drink liquids fast. So with this sleeve, you can't. Like even to date, I struggle with that. Like I'll still take too many big gulps and just be like, oh, that sucks. Like, so that would have been handy, especially now that I do like triathlons and runs and stuff, to be able to have that capability of being able to drink water fast, because that has been an issue for me. So that's probably one of the reasons I would have went down this way.
So I'm going to try and pronounce that word.
Okay.
It's steatorrhea. I think it's like.
What's it mean?
Okay, so it's also called oily stools.
Oh.
So essentially
So
it's
diarrhea.
saying oily stool can have causes that aren't due to underlying disease. Examples include eating foods with olestria or medication side effects. And it just says, make an appointment to see your doctor if you feel fatigue, experience persistent diarrhea, have belly pains, cramps, bloating and gas, or extreme weight loss, which I guess the extreme weight loss is kind of expected when you after having surgery. But it almost sounds like maybe dumping.
Yep.
Because that was another thing. Dumping is a lot less common in sleeve than what it is in bypass.
I think we confuse sometimes when people with sleeve go, oh no, I had dumping, and I'm like, no, that's not dumping. That I remember having that, the thick saliva,
That's the foamies.
The foamies. It's definitely not dumping, because the high sugar, because isn't it usually sugar that brings it on for bypass and stuff like that? Like I've seen some people have episodes of that, and they are literally
oily, fatty foods.
they can like shit their pants. Like it's pretty next level. Like
I feel like I've experienced it once.
we won't go into that.
But apparently it's like you just get like hot sweats, feel real like just rubbish, and then like you've just got to run. You've got to go to the toilet, and it's just not fun.
And obviously there's different forms of the bypass. So obviously the mini was one. You got the RYGB, which is the R and Y, I'm assuming. So R and Y. So that was kind of the first of them, I'm assuming, because it's kind of the OG.
I tried to. Well, it's a lot bigger, that one. It's a much bigger procedure, as is the Sadie, which I don't know a lot about the Sadie because I think that one's relatively new on the market. So the mini loop bypass, essentially they create like a sleeve, but they're bypassing your actual intestine. So it's essentially the step up from the sleeve.
Because he literally said he used to be the gold standard for revision or bad refluxes. Internal hernia, which I'm assuming is what he mentioned when I first listened. And it was internal hernia, 7% risk, can be life-threatening. Nuclear as per OAGB.
Ulcers.
Yeah. So I think that for me was must have been what I got told about.
The hernia.
And kind of went, oh yeah, I don't really want to have to be monitoring that my whole life, because I think it is not something that just comes on first up. It could be something down the track. And they have to kind of monitor it, which I'm assuming would be done through blood work and stuff like that. So that was kind of always a concern.
I'm gonna give you some homework for this this podcast, Shan, because I'm going to say that we're going to put up photos of each of the procedures.
Okay, yeah, we can do
video.
that. No, I can do that. That's easy. Google gives you that.
Yeah, so because then the Ruin Y is literally they do the same as what the loop is, but instead of doing a big loop, they actually make a big Y out of your intestines.
Yeah.
And they can't, so you've got a little two-way street. It's really hard to explain.
Yeah, on the video, I'll literally put up the picture
pictures of them.
I'm hoping they do have them, which I'm assuming
they
they would,
do.
just show how they do the plumbing differently with the different bypasses. Because obviously the last one, which was Sadie, typically for the super morbidly obese or for revision, because I have heard that a lot where people have revision for weight regain after sleep or something, and they usually go to Sadies. So it'd be interesting to kind of know why they go that form of bypass. Is it more...
Actually, quite a few people who we have spoken to who have gone from sleeve to bypass have been having the Sadies.
Sadies, yeah, rather than why it's that, not mini bypass or something.
Maybe
whether
it's got to do with the stomach, because if you've already had the sleeve done... and then the mini bypass is just bypassing.
Well, I think it's something we could
rerouting.
definitely look into later on, just to make sure we do know rather going, I think it would be. So yeah, they're kind of your different operations for bariatric surgery that you can go through.
There's also another one that we didn't mention, and I think this is a new one that's just coming out.
Yeah.
Don't read his response.
No.
It's hilarious. But essentially it's an endoscopy where they go in with essentially scissors, where they just through your throat, down your esophagus, super technical, because I'm pretty sure that's not how they do it, but essentially they go in through your
mouth.
It's
internal stitches.
and
they chop
and burn and stitch it and then they pull it out that way. So it's not like keyhole or anything like that. It's literally like an endoscopy, similar to how they do the balloon, but they're actually slicing your stomach.
Yeah, because it's a pretty new one. Like, but it's some people love it, some people hate it. Like, it's kind of a funny one because there could be some other complications. It's very early.
It is very early stages of it.
But it's kind of what's that called? It's called a
endoscopy.
Sleeve. Okay, that'll do.
An endoscopy
I'll have to
sleeve.
Google that one as well.
It's
It's very technical, considering like we're 4 years out and we sit down with people weekly and talk about bariatric surgery. We still kind of go, oh, what's that? Oh, it's a very complex world, and that kind of for me when I first went in to have my surgeon sit down, it was so overwhelming because like even that small amount of information that is just like normal stuff now was so overwhelming back then, and it can still be now. So going in and having your first sit down with your surgeon, don't feel like if you go there and you feel overwhelmed by the whole situation, you're pretty normal because we're not surgeons. They're putting a lot of information out there very fast. You're trying to process it. So that's kind of why we wanted to do this episode, so we can kind of hopefully give you a little bit more information for when you go in for that first sit down, so you understand the basic elements of bariatric surgery to kind of maybe ask the questions that you want answered and different things like that. Because I know in that first year I had no idea, and I was kind of just hoping for the best. So I did ask this surgeon reasons for being turned down for surgery. So he's kind of said crazy, unstable mental health, which is fair. Like, you kind of understand, because that was mine. Like, I remember going with my, not crazy, but like I remember going in and having like my pre-surgery appointments and stuff, and always trying to tell them what I thought they wanted to hear because I didn't want to get knocked back. Yeah. Like, you don't want to be that person that, oh, no. So like when they're talking like crazy or mental health, it's like literally if they see this form of surgery being a negative for you, which is, again, I'm sure the percentage of people that are knocked back is very, very low. And I think you'd have to have some really big red flags for them to be like, so maybe not for you.
And it's very unlikely, especially if you go with a team approach, as in if your surgeon has the whole dietitian and psychologist team in working with them, even if you don't particularly like pass the first, say, initial screening with the psychologist, they might go, you know what, just come back and have another session with me. One more, because there were maybe a handful of times where the dietitian and the psychologist from our practice would sort of go, oh, hang on, I had red flags. Did you have red flags? And then they'd sit down and go, okay, well, I want to see this person one more time. And they both go, yep, cool. If we're happy after that, then we'll give them the go ahead sort of thing. So that's the advantage as well of going with a team approach, because if you went to an outside psychologist and they just went, no, I don't deem you like mentally prepared for this, then you don't get a second chance. Yeah. Like you can't go back and like prove yourself. You know what I mean? Like, so
I think at the end of the day, like if you get knocked back, like they've taken the business approach. They want to put you on the table and do the operation because they make money out of it. But I guess they still have that duty of care that, like, if you're severely like that, if they feel like it's not for you, it probably isn't for you. If they're kind of saying, like, professionals that look at these cases in, day out, and then you're kind of like, oh, but I don't want to get knocked back. If they're knocking you back, it's probably for your benefit, because you probably would have had other issues if they had have proceeded that probably would have come around. Because obviously they mentioned in here, obviously, with eating disorder, which
a lot of us have.
Well, I thought the same thing when I read it. I'm like, I feel like we all now understand we had an eating disorder, whether it was binge eating or like, restrictive eating in some way. Like we all had some form of, which, so I think for them, if they're showing like a real, I guess like a dangerous, like you as a person are looking at food in a very dangerous way, where it's like a very exaggerated version of an eating disorder, where it's like, I don't know how you define that, but I feel like that's kind of what they're going with. Because I think anyone who has bariatric surgery understand that they didn't get overweight because they fell onto a cheeseburger. Like they literally once you have a feeling that comes from that food, which is inform an eating disorder. So, obviously they're talking about a very next level eating disorder. Do you know what's funny
too, though? From my experience, a lot of people go, all right, I'm going to go into the psychologist and I'm going to tell them what I think that they want me to hear. But more often than not, it'll be the dietitian that will have the final say. Because if they go, and we used to see it, they go, this person has like zero knowledge of any sort of food, like nutrition. Yeah. And then they'd work with them for a couple of times before the surgery, and that the dietitian would just go, look, they've seen me 3 times and they haven't changed anything about what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they're just going to use this operation as like a quick fix.
Hoping
they'll
it's quick fix,
end up just saying, you know what, like you're going to fail yourself.
Yeah.
Like it's, and that was one thing that I used to always say to people too. Pre-op, it sucks, but is 2 weeks for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you can't even get through pre-op, and this is going to sound so bad, like so rude, but if you can't make it through pre-op, how on earth are you going to try and think that you're going to be able to make it through the liquid stage, the puree stage? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I did ask that question to this surgeon, you know, what's the reason for pre-op and blah, blah. I have talked to another surgeon previously, and they kind of said they use pre-op. Sometimes they'll extend someone's pre-op if they feel like they're not taking it seriously enough to kind of make them prove that they really want to do it, because it's kind of like a semi-test, not just to your surgeon, but to yourself, to say like, hey, you need to take the emphasis off food. And I know pre-op is really hard because you kind of go from like eating whatever you want, especially if you did that year gap where you kind of just ate whatever you want because you're like, after, which I did. I was definitely
after surgery.
And, you know, and then you get entered into the world of like, hey, you get like a shake and blah, blah, blah. And it's like a very restrictive form of eating when you've just gone from like just eating whatever you want. It can be a struggle, but I think you need to mentally take that time to kind of go, okay, I need to change the way I look at food and just be willing to make the sacrifice for this change I want.
And everyone's human. Like it's 2 weeks and it is hard, and most people will, you know.
No, we're not going to justify people cheating.
No.
Pre-op.
But like most people will struggle with it. Like it is.
You will, 100%
and if you fall off the bandwagon, naughty, but just pick yourself up and just continue on.
Because that was like, we'll touch on that maybe now in a second, because we'll just quickly go over the other things that you may be turned down for before we get into the pre-op stuff, because I did ask, you know, what is the side effects of cheating and stuff like that. So we'll touch on that. So obviously going through the other stuff that you could get turned down for, medically erect, multiple previous surgeries. So I'm assuming if, you know, at the end of the day, it's the same as I went to a job and someone's dodged it up enough times or done a lot of things, it kind of becomes a bit of a risk.
Yeah, so if you've had multiple surgeries, they'll go in and do an endoscopy and just make sure if there's any like scar tissues or if there's any like things in there that it's going to be too risky.
Well, I remember talking to one person once where they literally opened them up and they touched and then they were bleeding because their internal organs just they weren't strong enough to be able to have the operation. So they sealed them back up and sent them away because, you know, you don't want to, you know,
they're not going to purposely put you in danger just to cut your stomach out.
It's not in their best interest to do that either. So obviously that's where that comes from. Always take a look at the laparoscopical and decide on this one. So that's obviously with the previous surgeries, they'll look through. They're not going to just be like, no, sorry, like I see you've got too much baggage, surgical baggage. We're not going to operate on you. They will have a look, do all the right things to make sure it's definitely not feasible. You've obviously got surgeon doesn't or can't do the op. The PT one. Oh, okay. So that obviously comes down to some surgeons, they will do, you know, maybe the RMY, the sleeve, and the band maybe, but they don't do like the balloon or the other surgeries. So that just comes down to obviously they're just not procedures. They may not agree with one of the surgeries or they just don't want to do that kind of surgery. So that's what it comes down to. So really all it comes down to with people not wanting you to have the surgery is for your best interest. That's all I'm getting from that. It's like, if you're getting knocked back for like your mental state, it probably wasn't in your best interest to have it anyway. So don't fear that. Just go in and be open and honest. And, you know, if they say, it's probably not going to be good for you
at this time,
it's going to save you a shitload of money, because if you have the surgery and then you fail and then you kind of go, well, they probably should have failed, like not let you have the surgery in the first place if mentally they thought you weren't ready for it. So I know for me going into surgery and having those things, it was a big concern of mine. And now kind of being 4 years out and looking back at this, I'm like, I see what they mean, because I've met a lot of bariatric people that probably shouldn't have had the surgery, and then they kind of took the approach of they were hoping it would do the job for them. And now understanding that isn't the case.
It's the number one thing that everybody says whenever we talk to our guests: mental health, get your head in the right place. Like without your head, like obviously your stomach's getting cut out or your plumbing's being rewired. Yes, you are learning things about your nutrition and what your body needs, but your number one thing is your headspace.
And that's not saying, like, we have had people say, but mentally I was fine. Like, I'm not, you know, mentally unstable. I'm not, but we don't mean it in that aspect. We mean it in kind of the way of, you need to understand you didn't get obese again for falling on a cheeseburger. You got morbidly obese at a point where you need bariatric surgery because your relationship with food isn't great. And if you're willing to sit there and be like, well, I don't need it, you know, I need bariatric surgery to help me lose weight, but I have no issue with food. Well, I think that's kind of a bit of a red flag because, you know, you are eating food it's like you're self-sabotaging your physical health for a reason. It's not because you just really, really like the taste of whatever it is. That may be a slight cause of it, but for you to put your health, your physical health at such a risk, you're doing it for a reason. And it's bariatric surgery will probably help you with that for the first year or two when you have the restriction and you know you have no ghrelin and you're not hungry and you're going, oh wow, this is great, like I'm losing all that weight I want to. But it's like literally the phrase I use all the time, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Whether you've had your stomach cut out or not, if you have that self-sabotage in your head where you're willing to put your your physical health at risk in the first place, you're going to do it again.
And that's it. It doesn't happen in the first year or two. Like you'll be like, ooh, I'm you know, coasting. I'm doing amazing. I'm losing all the weight. It's when you hit that maintenance phase that you kind of like, oh, okay, now I know what they're talking about.
It's even like, I think even after a year, I was starting to realize some of mine because my relationship with food is shit house, like terrible. Like even to date, it's still something I'm constantly having to work on. And like I'm a very, I guess, like a lazy, non-lazy person. So like I'm a very all or nothing kind of mentality. So I'm trying at the moment ease back from that because I am someone who's like bull out of a gate, give it 120% or give it nothing. So for me, I'm trying to find that balance now, 4 years out, still trying to like play around with it and, you know, riding the roller coaster, but I no longer probably have the restriction that the sleeve and stuff was giving to me, but because I've used the time previously to kind of start establishing certain habits that are kind of helping replace the spot that the sleeve has left. It's helping them to a degree, but saying that, I'm not 100%. I'm sitting here being like, I still have my shit I've got to work on. But I'm kind of understanding that I'm putting the ego aside and I'm saying I have an issue and I need to work on it because some people will take this surgery and be like, what, I don't have an issue. Well, why are you having bariatric surgery? Yeah. You know, like bariatric surgery isn't like a magic wand. It's not going to be like, and your mental state and your physical is all working perfectly. You're going to be a slim person from here on in, you know, because it doesn't work like that. So obviously when we talk about the year leading into surgery, you have to go through a few things. Once you find your surgeon, you have to kind of go and do certain tests. Obviously, we talked about psychology and sitting down with a dietitian and stuff like that. But you do have to do other tests, just obviously to make sure you're not a risk for them when they get on the table. So,
this will be different for everyone. Surgeon. There are a few that are like standard, but it'll be different for every surgeon and every individual that goes through there. But what did you go through?
Well, I had a sleep test, which you know, was a case of I wore a big machine to bed to make sure I didn't suffocate when they put me under. Pretty much, I think that's what they came down to.
So did you have sleep apnea beforehand?
No. Okay, but saying that, like, I'm pretty sure that machine wearing it for a night gave me sleep apnea because I have never slept so badly ever in my life trying to sleep with this machine, and then kept dreaming that I pulled something out and then woke up and blah blah. I also had to do a swallow test, which for me was went in, had to swallow some weird chalky crap, and then they kind of examined me as it went through and stuff like that. I had to do obviously the dietitian and had to do the psychologist, and that was pretty much it. Blood tests.
Yeah, so I didn't have to do the sleep apnea. I'm not sure why. I don't think very many people do throughout the surgery that I went through unless you already have severe sleep apnea.
Yep.
So I did the full bloods and I did the barium swallow.
Yep.
That was all, and obviously the psychology and the dietitian. And the barium swallow is to test for your reflux. So that's what it is. So the chalky thing is you have a drink of this chalky fluid liquidy thing, and as you swallow it down, they're taking x-rays of your esophagus and your stomach to see how much like gas and bile and stuff.
Stomach acid. Yeah.
So that's what the barium swallow is used for. And I'm pretty sure that almost every single surgeon gets you to do that because, again, if you're going in for the sleeve and they find out beforehand that you've got severe reflux, they will do the bypass over, well, they should do the bypass over the sleeve. So I think most surgeons will get you to do the barium swallow. So that's something fun for you guys to look forward to. And then the bloods, it's just because as far as I know, your bloods, a lot of people after bariatric surgery can get deficiencies, but also a lot of overweight people are already deficient in a lot of things anyway, because we don't eat the most nutritious diet and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I say that the full blood count, they're just getting a reading of where you're at and if they need to sort of work on something. So you might have to start taking vitamin D tablets or something like that prior to surgery to lift your levels up to then make sure that you're not starting out under par, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I remember actually that when I sat down with my surgeon, a story that kind of, because I've always been religiously about, multis, and that was something I religiously did for a few years. I still do it now. I have it on the coffee machine and still take my multis. And some people are very anti-multis, but for me, there was a story that I got told where someone previously had the sleeve and they really didn't put any emphasis into their nutrition. They just kept eating like crap and didn't have their calcium tablets. They didn't have their multivitamins. And then they end up with a spinal fracture because their bones have become so brittle from how deficient they had come that they literally fractured their spine. And that story for me kind of went, whoa, like I really need to make sure, because it's true. Like you can understand how it happens, because at the end of the day, if you have restricted eating now. So if you're still determined to eat the crap that has no nutritional value, plus not taking multis or anything like that, which is recommended by your surgeon, then clearly your body's just going to waste away and you're going to lose all your muscle mass. Your bones are going to become like brittle. Like it's kind of probably not going to help in any way whatsoever. Like, yes, you'll become lighter, but you'll become more unhealthy through how much your body's degrading because you're still determined to have your crappy Maccas or whatever it is, or a few chips with oil. And it's like, there's no nutrition in that for your body to kind of fuel off. So, hearing that story for me was like, well, some people would probably but for me, that really hit home because I'm like, I want to get healthy. I don't want to get skinny.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between the two.
So there's a few other tests that you might need that some surgeons might get you to do. So nutritional screening, which is your blood test.
Yep.
The barium swallow, which we've gone over. An endoscopy in some cases. So that would be if you've got, your previous lots of surgeries and all that sort of thing. Sometimes you'll get a liver ultrasound just to sort of see fatty liver, all that sort of thing. Bariatric GP review, dietitian, psychologist. Sometimes you'll see an exercise physiologist.
That's post-op, not pre-op, is it?
Sometimes you see them pre.
Yep.
Just to see, your cardiovascular health and all that sort of thing. Like,
I'm pretty sure it would all be non-existent at that stage.
Yeah, well, I know some surgeons that will literally put you on an exercise bike for a minute and just see how high your heart rate spikes and all that sort of stuff, just to see in cases of extreme exhaustion what your body does. Because if you're operating and something happens, they need to sort of see how your body reacts, I guess. And then some people will see a cardiologist and get an echocardiogram if they have heart issues.
And that's for more over 50s.
If they're over 50 or if they have heart murmurs or something like that. And then there are sometimes, in some cases, you can get an anesthetic review. So if you're somebody who, and I say this to people all the time, if you're someone who knows that you don't do well under when you go under, let your surgeon know. And they'll put you in contact with the anaesthetist that you're going to have on the day, and they'll just talk to you and put you at ease. I know there's been quite a few people who will actually have an appointment with the anaesthetist before the surgery and just have a chat, get to know them, and just sort of sit down and tell them, I'm super anxious about going under, and they'll put together a cocktail specifically for you. And that's what I did with my gallbladder, because I actually had the same anaesthetist for my gallbladder as what I did with my sleeve. And I said to him, I hate you. I don't like you. You're the person that I dread the most when it comes to operations. And he's like, why? And I said, because you make me feel like a rubbish afterwards. And he was like, oh, well, let me know. And he changed my cocktail up and I woke up fine after my gallbladder.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have any nausea. I didn't have anything because he actually put anti-nausea or more into the concoction before I went under. So I just told him, look, I hate the feeling when I wake up. That sounds super depressing. I hate waking up in the morning. No, but I just had a chat to him and he changed things around before he put me under. And so he's
like a bartender to a degree. It's like, so I had this cocktail, didn't really agree with me too well. Can you give me something to be a bit more?
But that's, if you're super anxious about going under, tell the surgeon. And most of the time they will put you in contact with the anaesthetist and you can have a chat with the anaesthetist.
I think it comes back to being transparent. Just being open and honest. They're not there. They want you to have the surgery because for them financially, they want you to have surgery. Plus they know it's going to benefit you if you're the right candidate. So never feel like you have to be hold back from being open and honest with them because they're the ones that are going to probably put you on the best path if you are open and honest with them.
And if you're open and honest with them, there's probably going to be less risk of complications because you're not lying to the person who's going to cut you open.
Yeah, I know. It's probably our first instinct because we kind of rely on this and we're kind of putting emphasis on we need to have this. It's like, but you need to also have it for the right reasons. So obviously touching back in with the pre-op, we'll talk about like, going through that pre-op, the 2 weeks, blah, blah. I did ask what are the kind of reasons for pre-op and also what happens if you do cheat, because obviously on the Facebook pages and stuff like that, you constantly see people being like, oh, I had this, I had blah, 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 blah. So that obviously with that, the main reasons to have pre-op is to make your stomach less fatty, and also
your liver less fatty.
It's your stomach. So so your liver more healthy, because obviously where they do your keyholes, your liver is right there. So the bigger it is, obviously the more complicated and risky it makes it. So the diet they put you on is to shrink that, make it less fatty, shrink your liver to make the access easier, to make it less complicated. So obviously if you're going to cheat that's the trade-off.
And I'll be 100% honest with people here. 3 times last year, the surgeon that I used to work for went in, had to get straight back out because they didn't do their pre-op properly. And the liver hadn't shrunk enough, and he said, I just can't, it's too dangerous. Yeah. So they went in, they had to pay for it because they still went in, had the surgery. Like you still had to, he didn't have to pay the surgeon fee. But the three cases, you still get put under, so you still got to pay the anaesthetist, you still got to pay the excess for the hospital, you've still got to pay for the equipment that they've used. For a 10-second, I've gone in there, we've prepped you up, we've gone in there, your liver hasn't shrunk because you haven't done your pre-op properly, put you back together, go back to the hospital, you wake up thinking, oh, wow, I've had the procedure, and then you get told, well, no, mate, sorry.
Well, because that is the trade-off, because at the end of the day, our livers probably aren't super healthy. A lot of us have like alcohol issues and blah, blah, blah. So like 9 out of 10 times, you probably will be okay if you get put under and you haven't done it seriously enough, which we're not encouraging you to cheat on it, because I think it's definitely something you need to put a lot of emphasis on and take the risk out of it, because you want to shrink your liver. But I'm sure 9 out of 10 times people go in, they probably haven't done everything to the T and they have no issues. But are you willing to risk, 2 weeks? 2 weeks, 3 weeks in some case, sometimes it's a little bit longer. But are you willing to risk not having this surgery that you put so much emphasis on changing your life just because of your reliance on certain foods and like your kind of you telling yourself you need that more than the risk of going on the table and then being sealed back up and sent home without the operation?
Some people might go, 3 people in a whole year. But that's like considering how many operations they do. But that's still like if you were that person. Wouldn't that suck? Like
that's taking all the other things out of the equation. Like they could open you up and then be like, oh, it's too risky for other reasons. So you kind of want to limit your chances of being opened up and then sent away as much as possible. And if that means like sticking to your food, like what they've told you to eat to shrink your liver, wouldn't you do that? Like I know it sucks, and like trust me, I struggled. Oh my God, did I struggle in pre-op? Like I was trying to like do all the vegetables, and then like I was like calling up, can I put like soy sauce onto my stuff, like to give it a little bit more taste, because it was so bland and it was so boring for me. But I look back and I'm glad I did do it, because it mentally kind of prepared me.
I think it's changed a lot since we did it too, though. Like I know that when I did my pre-op, I had to do it for 14 days, 2 weeks, and I had to do 3 shakes a day and had my like vegetable snacks in between. But now I'm pretty sure it's only 2 shakes a day, and you get to have like a salad and some lean meat for dinner.
Well, I think that was similar. I think mine was 2 shakes, and then I had unlimited vegetables, and I could have I think it was like 100 grams of chicken.
Yeah, see, when I did it, I wasn't even allowed to do that. So like I had to do my 3 shakes a day and then your unlimited vegetables. But if I was super hungry, I was allowed to either have 1 tin of tuna in spring water or 1 hard-boiled egg. And
it wasn't unlimited all vegetables either. I remember there was limited vegetables. And I remember
like non-starchy vegetables.
Calling my surgeon being like, can I have this? Can I have that? And they're like, yeah, you can have that. You can't have that. And I'm like, okay, cool. And like, just because I didn't want to not get that operation, especially when I'd spent a year paying private health and all this stuff, I was like, okay, I need to have this surgery because this is my new
I remember even after surgery when I met you, like I was eating these protein bars and you legit took a photo of the nutritional content on the back and sent it to your dietitian, was like, can I eat these? Like you were super
but even now these days, like I remember I was eating like protein bars and stuff, which we'll talk about again in the episode that we do later on, where we talk about like after surgery and stuff like that, where I was kind of like making really lazy decisions with food. Like now that I look back and I went, oh, I shouldn't have had that. But it was like, oh, my focus was so much on like protein and looking at these bars and like, but they have all this protein. And I was so narrowed in on like the protein's good, not understanding the sugar and the like the artificial sugars and like even the sodium levels and stuff like that. Like I was so just narrow-minded to like, no, I'm being good, but I kind of wasn't. So, you know, again, it comes down to, I was very serious even when it came to carbonation and stuff like that.
You were known as the carbonation king.
Yeah. So like I was very strict. Saying that, I think you need to understand that they put these rules in place for reasons. And I think you putting things on Facebook and being like, hey, can I do this or can I cheat this? You kind of got to ask yourself, like, why are you cheating? Like, what's that really doing? It's just kind of reinforcing that bad food relationship prior to you having a very expensive and very tough operation.
Well, I know the dietitians at the place that I used to work, we get the question all the time, can I have diet jelly in the first sort of 2 to 3 weeks? And technically you can have it when you're on the puree stage, but the dietitians are always like, why do you want sugar? Like it's got no sugar in it, but like, why do you want it?
It's more flavor. Yeah.
They were kind of like trying to discourage it to kind of being like, if you start having this sweet stuff, which isn't actually sugar, but if you start having this sweet stuff 2 weeks out, like you're still going to mentally want to have the sweet things.
Yeah. Which I won't go away overnight. So I do semi-understand that, because obviously we go from like having whatever we want and all the sugars and all, you know, to none.
Yeah.
So I do understand it, but I think eventually it's like you have to wean yourself off that. So, you know, if you don't start attempting it and like really making an effort.
Well, considering you've got your diet cordials and your protein waters and all those sorts of things that are quite sweet, like jelly in my mind as well is a dessert.
Yeah.
So like I'm not a huge jelly lover anyway, but like, I could kind of like understand, like the dietitians would probably kind of be kind of like, why are you going straight for jelly to get your sweet fix? Like,
I think it's very like, if coming from those kind of people too, like, you know, being nutritionists and dietitians, they are usually quite healthy people. And I guess our scale is very much the opposite way. Yeah. So like we're kind of trying to meet in the middle. So I do understand that. But I think if you're taking the effort to kind of trying to get someone else to justify your decision to have something negative, like naughty, that you kind of know is naughty, I think you need to maybe take that second, rather than typing it out and putting it, hoping someone justifies it, to take that second to understand why you want it in the first place. And like, is that the reason you got here to needing bariatric surgery in the first place? And, you know, just taking those little battles, mental battles, to kind of understand where you're at and start pushing forward. Because as we say all the time, you're not going to change overnight, but those little decisions to kind of call yourself out and understand is where the eventual success will come from.
Happens,
yeah.
My biggest tip for people likes to be put on this shake diet. Like, we've done shake diets before in the past and we've all hated them and whatever. I found it really helpful. Like, I knew that I had to do 2 weeks strict 3 shakes a day with just your allowed vegetables. So about a month and a half prior to me starting my pre-op, I started just taking out my breakfast and having a shake for breakfast. And I did that and just continued eating my normal meal throughout the rest of the day. And then sort of like 2 weeks out from starting pre-op, I introduced like a second shake. Not every day,
so like,
but just kind of like I weed myself into it.
You weed yourself into it?
I weed myself into it just so that it wasn't such a shock to the system. And I found that really helped for me, because it was kind of like you'd already gotten used to, and you don't have to do it every single day, but, you know, if a couple of times a week you replace your breakfast with a shake, just so that it's not kind of like, I'm on pre-op now and I have to do this. Like, it's something that you're kind of like working your way into.
It's not such a shock to the system.
Yeah, and also be super imaginative. Like, I know this is hard coming from people who, you know, we never used to really... Well, some of us never used to eat vegetables and we weren't into cooking and all that sort of thing, but you can make some really delicious meals with the food that you're allowed on your pre-op. So, like, there's so many vegan recipes out there now too that you'd be able to make, you know, delicious food. So a lot of people, when you're looking at pre-op, you kind of go, oh, I've just got to eat a bowl of broccoli and carrots and that's what I'm allowed to eat.
Yeah.
But I was making, like, so you can have cognac noodles, and I was making almost like a spaghetti bolognese out of all of the free vegetables, or even like a vegetable ratatouille that, you know, you'd get your fresh tomatoes and make the tomato sauce out of that, and you chop up your eggplants and your carrots, and you can make a really meaty flavored meal out of the vegetables that you're allowed to. So just do your research, and like, you don't have to sit there and eat a cup of broccoli.
Well, if you're time lazy, like, or time poor, or like a little bit, I was very lazy in that. And I used to just do like a stir fry, like put them all together and put a bit of soy sauce and like make something that wasn't like,
soy sauce, a tiny bit of honey and some garlic.
Yeah.
Done.
Like they're all little, like
noodles.
all the little condiments that you can add. Like make sure you check with your surgeon, make sure it doesn't go against your guidelines, but you can add little like condiments to kind of make it a little bit more savvy.
Hummus with celery and carrots,
different things like that. There are little options, and I think it doesn't fall within the realm of what you were eating, but there are other options out there. And like for you to sit there and be like, oh, I can have his carrot sticks. It's like, no, you can have other things as well. And maybe make a bit of a challenge out of it, see if you can kind of find some other foods that you enjoy and start kind of expanding your idea of the basis of what healthy food looks like. Because I think that was something I had to put a lot of emphasis on, and I still, like, I think you helped me a lot with that, open my eyes up to a lot of different things, foods that are out there that kind of go, okay, wow, that's actually quite nice, or that goes really well with that, or like, rather than me being like, oh, this pizza from Woolworths is great, whatever it is, little things like that. I started like going, oh, well, maybe this is just as easy, a little bit more nutritional value, and it's quite tasty. So, it's trying to understand that. So
I think the other thing before we move on from pre-op, a lot of people say they really struggle, especially if they're not telling people that they're having the surgery, and that, you're at work and you're on your shake diet and you're sitting in the tea room and everyone else around you is eating lunch and you're sitting there sipping on a shake. The way that I structured mine was I woke up in the morning and I would do like asparagus, mushrooms and tomato in the fry pan with a bit of soy sauce. That was my breakfast. So I was actually eating a meal for breakfast, and I'd have my breakfast shake at morning tea time. And like, because I'd be able to sit at my desk and drink it, and it was almost like people wouldn't question you. And then at lunchtime, I'd have my vegetable spaghetti or my stir fry or whatever. But again, at lunchtime, I would be sitting in my tea room actually eating a meal. So others around you, and it was almost like more of a structure, because it wasn't like, oh, breakfast I'm having a shake, lunch I'm having a shake. It was breakfast I'm having food, morning tea I'm having a shake, lunch I'm having food, afternoon tea I'm having a shake. That's how I structured it, so that you feel like you're actually having the meals that you're meant to throughout the day, and you're not like fanging for this shake, because you're not really going to get that much enjoyment out of a shake. But you can also sit there mindlessly and drink the shake at your desk, and you're not going to have people questioning you, being like, oh, you're doing another shake diet again, that didn't work for you last, you know what I mean? Like, it's not as shameful. If that makes sense.
It's not something you feel like you're as judged about.
Yeah.
No, I do appreciate that. And also, like, I think depending on where you want to be, like, I remember I had a conversation, which again, Ash, my ex, that we're going to have on, I won't go too much into obviously what we had the conversation about, because I think it'd be very good for her episode, but I think understanding what you want to get from this surgery in that early stages and having the conversations with the experts, because, it may be you don't want to have loose skin. So you sit down and talk to, like, an exercise physician, or you talk to, you bariatric nutritionist or dietitian about, your best plan, your best methods, and what to eat and what to focus on to not have that. That's better done in that first year leading in, as much as it may seem super daunting. Having those conversations and getting a little bit more knowledge in those early stages and setting you up on the right path isn't a bad way to go about it. There's a reason why you have these professionals in place, and be willing to use them, because I think some of us are a bit like, I don't want to talk to them too much because I don't want them to have a reason to not give us the surgery, but they are full of knowledge that will be able to help you get the eventual results you want to get. The other thing, obviously, I said to the surgeon I reached out to was, do you think that this surgery, because obviously cost was a big thing that came into play, will be more publicly accessible? Because I know there are cases where people go public. So I thought we'd obviously just quickly touch on that before we finish up this episode. Some people can go through the public system in Australia.
There's about 50 people who get accepted a year.
Yeah.
Through the public system.
Which in the scheme of things is very minimal. And they're usually, I'm assuming, people that are very morbidly obese.
They're
and probably
almost like emergency cases sort of thing. Like it's not like you just put your name down on a waiting list to go on it eventually. Like there is a waiting list for it. But realistically, you're going to be waiting up to 5 years, if not more, to get accepted publicly.
Yeah, because I know AMSMOS, like Australian.
AMSMOS, yep.
What does it stand for?
Australian New Zealand Medical Association something.
So they kind of deal with like the obese. Like it's a big meeting that they have once a year. It's a big committee between Australia and New Zealand, where all of your surgeons, all your bariatric dietitians, all the psychologists, it's all like even like
nurses, coaches, anybody who's like registered as a bariatric physician, so to speak. They're all part of this big forum, and once a year they have this big, massive like workshop, which is televised for all of the people within the community. And it's something that they have been pushing for years. And unfortunately, it's unlikely to be put through the system anytime soon.
Yeah. So it's you can definitely, if you want to look at the public system, look at the public system, but you got to understand 50 people a year get accepted through it. So it's very unlikely that you will.
Considering most surgeons do 10 plus patients a week. 50
is very minimal.
Is very, very
so
minimal.
like if you are like kind of really struggling, maybe do look at that avenue, but also maybe don't be afraid to look into private health cover, sit down with a bariatric nutritionist and have the conversation, a bariatric surgeon, and have the conversation about like options, like even payment and different things like that, payment plans. I think some do that as well. So, cost can be a big thing, but like I said, when I took the gap, like at the end, I took that out of my super. And as much as I hate touching my super because I want it to, I know
grow,
it will grow over time if I don't touch it. It was either use my super or not be around long enough to use my super. Yep. You know what I mean?
And just touching on the use of your super, a lot of people don't realize that you get taxed on the withdrawal of your super.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to look into, because I took what I thought was $7,000 out of my super. I actually ended up taking out $10,000 of my super, and I got taxed $3,000 essentially, which then put me up into the higher price bracket for that financial year, which therefore incurred a few other issues that I ran into. So just be aware that if you are using your super, it is a taxable income. And if you take, say, 10 grand out of your super, that adds $10,000 onto your, because they see that as a pay slip. They don't care where the money was spent. They've just gone, all right, well, you've gotten, so if you're taking out the full amount, 24,000, that could put you over the tax, like into the next tax bracket, which could, affect your childcare payments, or it could affect all those sorts of things. So if you are looking into getting your super out, just make sure that you double check with either your surgeon's office or call the ATO or something like that, and just find out what that means for you.
Yeah, I'll talk to your accountant and just make sure it fits within like your realms of financial stability. So it's definitely something to be open-minded about and understand. But I hope that this episode for people, because obviously a lot of people that will sit down and listen to this episode are going to be like in that early stages, maybe even thinking about surgery. Don't feel discouraged. Like still to date, yes, there's a lot of things that you have to go through. It is by far the best thing I've ever done for my life.
Me too.
Without bariatric surgery, as much as I know I've developed like certain things that probably would have helped me lose the weight. Without bariatric surgery, those wouldn't have been into play.
And there's always workarounds as well.
Yeah. Totally.
Always. So if you're one of those people that are just gone, you know what, I'm really going to struggle at XYZ, tell the truth. Talk to the dietitian, talk to the psychologist, talk to your surgeon, because it's not their first rodeo. They've dealt with millions of people before who have probably been in the same situation as you, and they will find a workaround for you.
Yeah.
The surgeons want you to have the procedure. They don't want you to die on the table, and they want you to be a success story afterwards. Like your surgical team is batting
on your
for
side.
You. They want you to succeed. So talk to them, be open and honest with them, and just.
And if you sit down with the surgeon and he doesn't give you that feeling of wanting that they're on your
change
side,
surgeons.
Change surgeons. Like at the end of the day, if you have to pay an extra couple of grand, but you get a supportive team that kind of, are on your side, that's the best investment you can make. And I think that sometimes you need to look at it as like, you're not investing in a surgery, you're investing in a team, and you're investing in your future.
Your success,
so, is a couple of grand or $3 or $4 grand worth that investment, that you're investing in something that's going to help you eventually get to what you hope you're going to get from this bariatric surgery, then it's a great investment. Look at it as an investment opportunity. It's an investment in the best thing, which is you. So, on that note, I hope this helps. Processing a little bit better, because that's why Alita and I started this bariatric podcast in the first place, is because I know for myself it was so daunting that first year leading into surgery, because I didn't really know anyone. Like I met the Instagram world and stuff after, and I've developed friendships after surgery. But I know in that first year leading in, it was so daunting, not knowing what was to come, not understanding kind of the procedure leaning forward, what certain things were being done for, and that for me made me very withheld with what I shared with my team.
Especially as well though, because like Facebook, the forums, there's probably like 3 negative posts to 1 positive post.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, we just wanted to not have any of the, yes, today we've sat down and gone over what a surgeon has said, but we want to keep this podcast about everybody's journeys and like not necessarily the statistics and everything, because we just want this to be a resource for people to just know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That, you know,
and give it a bit more clarity on the whole thing.
Yeah, because like you can go down and sit down and talk to a surgeon and a psychologist and a dietitian, and they've got what they say, you know.
Yeah,
they
the spiel. Well, even like I literally said to this surgeon, "Can you dumb it down for me?" And I was still like looking at it, going, "I don't understand what that means," or that understand.
Yeah.
And I know me sitting down and even one of those words coming across, I would have got distracted by that word and be like, "I don't understand what that means."
And
I obviously, you know, gone off on a different tangent. So you know,
that's what this podcast is.
We're trying to simplify it to dumb it down to my level, which hopefully means most people should understand it, because you know I can understand it. So if you can't, feel free to reach out and ask the question if I didn't pronounce a word right or something. But we hope it kind of just gave a little bit more understanding. So when you go into with your surgeon, you want to ask the questions, or you do have the questions to ask, or you just feel more comfortable going into this.
And you feel inspired to actually be going ahead with the surgery, and you know you are making the right decision. It's a bloody big decision to be making, but regardless of your situation, it is life-changing, and
it is.
We just really hope that these podcasts can kind of shed light on that, and you know you're not alone. There's other people out there who have gone through exactly the same thing as you have, and just grab it by the balls.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Anyway, guys, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Again, we have the links below for our Patreon if you want to join the Bari Banter family to another level. Support this podcast if you like what it's about. Please do. If you want to reach out to us or even come on the show, www.baribanter.com. You can go through there, fill out the form, and we will get you on, because we would want to hear your story and get your voice out there as well, so you might be able to help someone's process go that little bit easier. But on that note, that is another episode of Bari Banter.